Welcome back. Richard, it's good to see you again.
Nice to, I was going to say, it's nice to be seen. It's good to see you too.
Yeah, we're gonna.
You're having good weeks?
It's it's getting close to the end of the school year. We are well into testing season, and so every day's a new day. You never know what's going to happen at school.
Well, I don't know much about, I don't know anything about quantum physics or much about Einstein. But he talks about time being compressed, which I don't know what that means in his world. But in my world, you talk about we're almost at the end of the school year. I feel like we're just trying to get used to the school year because of the pandemic. So wait a minute, the school year's over, right?
Yeah.
And New Year's resolutions, we're at month 5. We're ready to begin May. So if you haven't started your New Year's resolution yet,
That's
you
right.
may want to consider it.
One of
And
my
time has just taken on a whole new concept this year.
has one of my principals sent out an email the other day, and it says there's just under 30 days left of school, 30 school days left. It's like, wow.
There are schools that are going to be ending May 28th. Some
Yeah.
schools will be over on May 28th.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're not the only ones saying, where did this year go?
Absolutely.
And, because it's because of the pandemic,
Yeah.
and this pandemic that just refuses to go away. And once again, we're hearing about a surge in India and,
Right.
and other countries that are beginning to experience a surge. And this thing just doesn't want to let go.
Absolutely. So, and after the year we had in 2020 and the way that things have been, a third of the way through 2021, found an interesting article that we're going to talk about today, where it's, we talk about, we've talked about depression, and we've talked about, COVID fatigue and all of these different emotions and feelings that we're having because of all this that we're exactly talking about. And this author refers to it a little bit differently. And I think that this is a really interesting notion, and something that we should, that certainly deserves some discussion.
Yeah, we were kind of leafing through some articles, just kind of as we do, sort of looking through stuff to see what's going on. And we ran into this article. It was actually written by a licensed clinical social worker. And she was writing an article about a study, an article that was written originally in the New York Times. But when she being Elena Primack-Sandler, was the author of the first article. And I just got a big kick out of the introductory comments that she made, referring to Thursday as hit by a bus day.
Right.
I think most of us have probably experienced that,
Right.
where because of the pandemic and because of what it's done to our sense of time and to our work week and our work schedule, somebody said the other day, I just can't keep track of the days. I'm always thinking about what day is it. And so she calls Thursday hit by a bus day. She said she can make it through Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but something happens on Wednesday and she just can't continue. And it's also become known as Blur's Day, which I think is an interesting way to put it. The other interesting comment she had, which I'm going to have to use with my sister, she said, I'm able to do the detritus of adulthood, like take a shower and make food and straighten up the house. And I guess I felt that way many times.
Yeah.
I never heard it expressed quite so eloquently.
Right.
As we have to do the detritus of adulthood. So look up detritus if you don't know what that means. Yeah. So, she said by 3:00 that she knew on Thursdays that things aren't going well because she could tell that she was getting cranky and irritable and snappy. Right. And I'm sure she and I aren't the only two people who get that way at about 3:00 in the afternoon on Thursday.
Right. Yeah.
By 4:30, I was done. And she said I was eating and watching TV at the same time. And she said, that's something I typically don't ever do, is watch TV and eat at the same time. So after laughing through all that, she got to the point, which is this concept of languishing. She said, I finally found a descriptive term to explain what I what she and no doubt others are experiencing. And she
Yeah.
called it languishing from this larger article in the New York Times.
Right, and that piece from the New York Times is by Adam Grant, and we have presented some of his stuff before. But yes, this idea of languishing is really interesting because it's not a descriptor that we're accustomed to using. We don't typically use that word, but the way that it is described and the way that it's talked about in these articles certainly fits with the way that most of us feel and what most of us are experiencing, because there's, it's not really depression, we're not hopeless, we're not, sad, we're not that, but it's just we're not really burned out,
Right.
because we're going to work and we're doing things, we have some energy and everything. But my goodness, there is something that's happening that is just wearing us down. And languishing seems to be a pretty good term to fit.
Yeah, it really is, because you have this sense that you're really not depressed. It's not clinical depression where you just can't get out of bed in the morning and you have there's no joy, there's no, nothing feels good. But on the other hand, the other extreme between, if you put depression at one end and you put flourishing at the other, where you feel good and you're getting things done and you just have a bright outlook, things are looking really good. Languishing is between depression and flourishing. And I think that's an interesting place to put it, is that you're not clinically depressed. It's not a mental illness that you're experiencing, but you're just not working, you're just not functioning at full capacity. There's just something wrong. So Grant came up with this concept of languishing.
Yeah.
And things like you're having trouble concentrating,
Yeah.
for sure. There's no excitement. The vaccines came out and you sort of felt some optimism, but then it faded very quickly. Okay. You have late night binge watching. Most of us have been guilty of that, even those of us who typically go to bed early.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's sort of like time, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier already. The time feels so different now, because it's like, I know I have to get up for work tomorrow morning, but I'm still staying up later than I should be staying up, just watching shows that really don't matter all that much. But it's bizarre.
Yeah, the Sandler at one point said she's watched National Treasure like 30 times. She said, I've memorized the whole dialogue. I know all the scenes and all the script and everything. But you keep watching it, because it fills some void. So you're right. It's not burnout. We have energy. So it's not kind of burnout that we sometimes experience. And it's not depression because we don't feel hopeless.
Right.
That's not capturing it. But what we are feeling is a certain joylessness and aimlessness,
Right.
which I think captures it. So he defines it as languishing is a sense of stagnation and emptiness. It feels as if you're muddling through your days, looking at your life through a foggy windshield. And it might be the dominant emotion of 2021.
Yeah. And I think that this is important because, like we said, there seems to be a lot of people that are experiencing this. And it's just, we're kind of trudging through day after day. And I think that contributes to the way that time feels like. It feels like days are very long, but yet it's the end of April. So the months are going by fast, but the days seem to just take forever. It's sort of like we all have this anticipation of something to come. So we have, again, it's not hopelessness because we're like hoping for this, whatever this deadline, this date to come. But it's non-specific. It's not like it's, June 1st. As soon as June 1st gets here, everything is going to be better. It's not like that. And I think that it's wore us down emotionally. And it's very pervasive. Many people are experiencing this.
We are. And the other thing I like about this term languishing, and he puts it further in perspective. He said at the beginning of the pandemic, we were feeling, we were anguish. It was anguish that we felt. Okay. There was fear. There was the uncertainty of how does this thing spread? Will I get it? We learned that through anguishing, we were anguished about it. We learned that masks probably were effective. In fact, there was another report this morning about the value of masks in schools. And so we knew that. And you remember the times when we were talking about scrubbing our grocery packages, scrubbing packages when we got things delivered?
Yeah, I remember that people would go into grocery stores and stuff wearing gloves, and yeah, they talked about bringing your groceries in and putting them in one room and going through and cleaning them all before you put them away into the main living area. Yeah, that was early on.
Right. And so so we learned what probably worked and what wasn't necessary. And so it kept us alert. There was a certain alertness in the early pandemic about how do I keep myself safe? What am I allowed to do? People would take their shoes off before they went into the house. They'd leave their shoes outside. They'd wash packages. They would social distance in a home. And then so we developed these routines which helped us deal with our anguish. Okay. But as the pandemic wore on, we entered a second phase where anguish became languish, and I like that transition.
Right.
Because I think what we're going to see in the rest of 2021 is we're going to have languishing that is going to become something else. It's going to become something else, and the something else is probably that relief that we're all looking forward to.
Right. And as you said earlier, this is that in psychology, we love spectrums. We love to say this is at one end and this is at the other end. And as you said earlier, when we think about the spectrum of depression and on one end and flourishing on the other end, and languishing is there in the middle. I love the idea that languishing is the neglected middle child of mental health.
That's a wonderful, it's a wonderful description.
Because we don't really talk about it all that much because it's not pathological. It's not, creating, where a person is, it's affecting their functioning. So it's not making people dysfunctional. It's just blah.
Yeah, languishing, it dulls your motivation, certainly. Okay. It disrupts your ability to focus, and it triples the odds that you'll cut back at work.
Right.
We're all working.
Yeah.
But most of us are not working at the pace, rate, intensity that we were working before the pandemic. I'm sure some of us are, most aren't. So this concept of languishing, we're all feeling it. Now we have a word for it. The concern about languishing, and there is one thing we have to be careful of, because there are some studies that have been done. Evidence from the pandemic in Italy, and you remember Italy was one of the first countries that was really hit by this pandemic. Thousands of people, especially in northern Italy, were dying. And so researchers went in and studied the professionals, the first responders in Italy. And it suggests that healthcare workers who were languishing in the spring of 2020 were 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with PTSD.
Right.
So languishing hit earlier in Italy than it did here because the pandemic arrived there before it did here, at least the acute phase of the pandemic. Yeah. And so when you go back and look at the workers in Italy who were languishing, they were 3 times more likely to be hit with PTSD than the normal population. So we might anticipate that same thing happening here, that languishing will eventually lead to PTSD.
Yeah, and I think that the real issue, as came from this article, is that when you're in this sense of languishing, because you're not because it's not impairing your function, your ability to function, and because you're not depressed, and you're not any of those things that we think of as pathological. You don't really attend to and notice some of the other things that are happening, like your dwindling of delight or the decrease in drive. You're maybe spending more time alone, and you're you're indifferent to your indifference.
Right.
And so you don't really notice that you're struggling with these things because it's not so severe that it's impairing anything. And so you can get help.
Right. This particular segment of the article where he talks about you don't realize that you're in it. You know, it's like the parable of the boiled frog.
Right.
You know, where, you gradually sort of you become indifferent. You know that things aren't quite right. You know that you're sort of, but you're not fully aware of it. You're not so severely affected that you feel like there's something dreadfully wrong with you, but yet you know you're not functioning as you normally would.
Right.
But you're not aware of it, and even if you do, you're just indifferent to it.
Right.
Not in a depressed way, but you don't see your own suffering.
Right.
So there's no need to do much about it, except that you end up with this feeling of aimlessness or joylessness.
Right. And it really goes against, you know, in America, we think about, we always have to be upbeat. We always have to be positive. When somebody says, "How are you doing?" I'm doing great.
I'm great. Today's great. Best day of my life. Right?
That's right. And I do it at school all the time. I can have like 50 million things happening all at one time, and someone say, "Hey, how's your morning going?" I'm like, it's so good. I couldn't even imagine it any better.
I can't imagine.
Inside, I'm thinking, I really want to just like leave. I really want to go home.
Right.
But we do that, and so being honest and naming it. We've talked about this many times before. Identifying how we're really feeling and naming it and acknowledging it is so powerful.
Right. Yeah, to have a name for it. To me, it was a relief just to know that, oh, that's what it is. We talked about the malaise early, we did a podcast on malaise. But I like languishing, we're kind of languishing in the pool. But you're right, to have a name for it really, really helps. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about naming what you have.
Right.
And they said, honestly, if you responded, I said, "Hey, Bernie, how you doing this morning?" And you would say, "Oh, I'm really languishing."
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really languishing. And then we could have a conversation, because he calls it toxic positivity, where you have to be upbeat, and you have to be happy, smiling, and positive, because after all, I'm going to have lunch in Paris this afternoon, because that's what most of my friends are doing. They fly around the country having dinner. That's what Facebook says anyway. And so we have this toxic positivity. And we have to be upbeat all the time. But I'm going to start, because you don't want to burden people with Debbie Downer, and say, things are terrible, and you don't want to impose on people, and you don't want to tell the truth, because then you'd have to charge them for therapy or something.
Right.
You really want to know, but then I have to become a patient. So we have a name for it now. It's called languishing.
Right. Now we need an antidote.
Now, what do you do about it? Exactly.
Right.
So what do we do about languishing?
Yeah. And I like the first thing that's mentioned, and that's the idea of flow.
Flow.
And I just listened to the audio version of Daniel Pink's book Drive, and Daniel Pink, I guess he knows or knew Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Is that how you say his name? He's the psychologist who came up with the idea of flow.
Csikszentmihalyi.
He pronounces it Csikszentmihalyi.
Okay.
But if you were to look at the sequence of letters that
it's the whole alphabet.
It is really difficult.
I mean, you don't know how to pronounce. I mean, when you can't phonetically break the name down, because our language isn't structured that way.
Right. Yeah.
How does he pronounce it?
Csikszentmihalyi.
Csikszentmihalyi.
And he pronounced his first name Mihai, even though there's an L in there.
Okay.
Yeah. But he came up with the idea of flow. And this idea that when you're doing something that you become, that just absorbs you, you just fall into it. The idea of time begins to disappear. The idea of what you're actually doing. I have a friend who when she's doing work, she'll say that she'll even forget that she that anything is happening, that because she's so focused that
Right.
not paying attention to your phone, not paying attention to whatever else is going on, because you're so absorbed in that task
Right.
that you know the world is going on around you, but you're focused and in flow.
Right. You know, one of the good explanations of flow was, remember when Michael Jordan used to have those basketball games where he would sort of take over the entire game and
Right.
score 80 or 90 points or something. And there's this famous picture of him just shrugging because even he didn't quite understand
Right.
what was going on. And that was one description of flow. But I like your description because I've heard people say, I forgot to eat. You
Right.
know, a mealtime went by, but I was so engaged, I was so absorbed that I forgot to eat. I've never forgotten to eat.
Hmm.
You wouldn't know that, but my brother talks about that. He's a musician, and he would get so involved in his music that he wouldn't eat. He would skip meals, because he just worked right through it. Didn't bother him. So one of the things we want you to think about is what absorbs you.
Right.
What can you get completely immersed in? Um, some people use video games. Some people binge watch, binge watching a movie,
Yeah.
playing a sport.
Yeah.
I can get pretty immersed when I'm golfing. I can pretty much forget about things. I don't golf often, but when I do, I get immersed in that and I can forget about everything else. Fishing does the same thing. So what you have to learn about yourself is what absorbs you. Where's your flow? How do you get to flow?
Yeah. And one of the ways that was described in that book to figure that out is to set up on your phone sort of a there are apps to do this and different ways to do this, but to have your phone go off at random intervals over the course of a month, or or the week or so. And each time it goes off, your alarm goes off, just make a note of what you're doing, how you're feeling, what mental state are you in, that kind of thing. And then you can go back and analyze that, look at that data, and you can find that what you were doing at times when you felt really good. And the likelihood is that those are the types of things that you could be doing that will put you into flow, and really engaged.
I had a funny thing happen the other night. We went to this short musical presentation. Not a musical, it was a live music event over a couple of hours. And I left my phone in the car accidentally, and I
Mhm.
didn't feel like going back out to get it. It was a very different experience
Yeah.
because I was able to focus on the music
Mhm.
and I was looking for things to do.
Yeah.
As who do I talk to or where? Because it was a venue where you could walk around and talk to people. And I thought, what am I going to, because everybody else was on their phones
Yeah.
and I had nothing to do. And it
Mhm.
was but it forced me to move to a different place,
Right.
and I thought, wow, most of us are engaged on our phones.
Mhm.
But, and you can see that with people being, uh, they're just, you can see a table of people, they're all on their phones while this music is being played. So if you could put your phone down, put the devices away and figure out what 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 grabs you
Right.
besides your phone, besides the cell phone, what else can you do?
Right.
So that's the first thing is where do you find flow?
Yeah. And the second one is focus.
Mhm.
And the idea that fragmented attention is the enemy of engagement and excellence is how
Right.
it's put. And yes, the idea that to and part of that I think is associated with flow, is that is focusing on something,
Right.
whether it is a specific task or it's a project or something singular,
Mm.
focusing on that and putting your attention and energy into that is going to help, again, increase some energy and kind of get you motivated to do some things.
And they also warn us about not trying to multitask because you have to focus on one thing. The way the brain works is that you do it does one thing at a time. Uh, Many people can. I think you're one of the few people who can do more than one thing at a time. You have that thing in your office about too many tabs open,
Yeah.
because you have, I've walked into your office where you have a cell phone, an iPad, and 2 computers going.
Mhm.
And most people can't do that. I think there's 2 or 3 out of 100 are able to multitask. Most of us cannot multitask. And so focus on what you're supposed to be doing. There was a study done about some companies are doing what they call a no interruption policy, and they bring their workers in, and from 8 until noon, roughly the first 4 hours of the workday, they mandate that nothing else happens but your work. You cannot be interrupted. There's no emails, there's no calls, there's nothing. 47% of people had increased productivity when they managed that focused attention on their own. But when the company said you must do it, 65% had increased productivity. And so we don't do a good job when we're left to our own, because we tend to open emails and open texts and respond to calls. But when it's mandated, when the company said, no, you have this time, not that you have to do it, but that you're permitted to do it. You don't need to respond to emails. You don't need to respond to text. You can just focus on your work. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing?
Absolutely.
A no interruption policy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's related a little bit to the next one, which is setting small goals.
Right.
And I think it's very true that we love challenges, generally speaking. And so when we set small goals that are challenging, that kind of push us a little bit, but they're achievable, we can accomplish them in a reasonable amount of time, we find much more drive, much more motivation to be doing whatever it is that we need to be doing, because we have this target. It's ideal for it to be self-imposed. If I tell myself I want to accomplish this much by the end of the day, I'm going to have much more intrinsic motivation to get that done. Whereas if somebody else says you have to get this much done by the end of the day, I'll still get it done perhaps, but it'll be a different kind of pressure, and it won't be the same kind of enjoyment energy as it will be distressing energy. And so setting small goals for yourself that are manageable but challenging and kind of push you a little bit is another great way to kind of overcome some of this languishing.
That's right. So if you put these 3 together, if you think about flow, something that's really, really important to you, something that really absorbs you. So we're not asking you to do, you and I have some some deadlines,
Right.
that we're feeling the urgency to meet those deadlines. That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about something other than your workaday world. So find flow, whatever absorbs you, immerse yourself in something.
Mhm.
Second, find focus. And third, set small goals for yourself. What he calls just manageable difficulty.
Right.
What can you do that will make and give you a sense of accomplishment? Okay. So as we head into the post-pandemic reality,
Right.
and there is going to be one,
Mhm.
we have to rethink our concept of mental health and well-being. I know that many of you are concerned about, am I depressed? Am
Mhm.
I, what is this thing that I'm in? You're probably not depressed. Okay. You're not feeling up to par. You know that you have this vague sense that something is wrong, but it's probably not depression.
Right.
Now, because it doesn't mean that you're not struggling.
Mhm.
Certainly you're struggling, but it's not the kind of depression that we worry about clinically.
Yeah, I think that something that just kind of came to my mind as you were saying that, is that I think that it might do us well to consider the idea that we are already in the post-pandemic reality.
Right.
Again, we're sort of holding on to some anticipation of something to come. Like, I can't wait till we get back to normal. That's what everybody says. So we're in this anticipation phase instead of a living for today phase.
Mm-hmm.
So we're waiting for tomorrow that, it has been going on for a year and a half. But, let's recognize that, okay, this may be the way that life is for a while, at least for a while, if not, who knows how long.
Right.
It could be a lot worse, you know. but let's think about how can we make today the best that we can make today, instead of saying, I just want to get through today and see what tomorrow is going to bring, because
Right.
tomorrow is just going to be another today.
Tomorrow's right, right. And it's going to be Groundhog Day,
Right.
that movie Groundhog. We're going to keep doing this for a long time. And there's no way to accelerate it.
Right.
There's no way to get to, we've said many times on this program, there is no new normal. Okay, there's going to be another reality that we have to deal with, but it's not a new normal. And there's nothing you can do to get back to 2019.
Right.
When people say, I want to get rid of my mask, look, we all want to get rid of our masks.
Right.
We all find them burdensome. We all find them to be a nuisance. You're not the only one, whether you like it or not. Everybody wants to stop wearing a mask,
Mhm.
but it's the easiest way to keep a lid on this, on making this pandemic worse. So just by getting rid of masks isn't going to get us back to 2019. We're not going back to 2019.
No,
This
no.
this and this flu, this illness is going to be with us for at least a decade.
Yeah.
You know that, everybody knows that. Okay,
Right.
so there's nothing you can do to accelerate it. So, you know, you can complain if you want, but you're not going to accelerate this process. We have seen ourselves go from anguish to languish, and there's going to be a third phase.
Right.
And you're not going to create 2019 simply by saying I don't want to wear a mask anymore.
Right. Yeah. I think that transition to whatever the third phase is after language it will come when we are more comfortable with accepting where we are.
That's
uh,
right. That's
that
right.
this is just the way that we have to, that this is the way that life is now,
Right.
and accept that, and move on, and live life.
Exactly.
A lot of people are living life.
And acknowledge that you're languishing. That don't be embarrassed. There's nothing wrong with it. Most of us are feeling it. I mean, we've all been touched by this pandemic in one way or another. I mean, either love it or hate it or accept it or reject it. Even if you reject the whole thing, you've still been affected by it. Okay. So we have all, in one way or another, been affected by this pandemic. And most of us are languishing. This has been a difficult year for most people. If you have elderly relatives to take care of, if you have children to take care of who are in school, if you're dating or trying to date, if you like to go out to restaurants. I mean, all of us have been affected,
Right.
and we are all experiencing something akin to languishing.
Right.
So it's okay to admit it. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to say, "Oh, I'm having a good day, but I'm still languishing a little," and that gives you a common vocabulary to discuss your current state.
Absolutely. So acknowledge it, recognize it, acknowledge it, and let's move to that next stage
Right.
of where we need to be. So, all
Right.
right. Well, I think that is it then for today. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Almost May. A couple more days and it's May, right? Here we
Right.
go. 5 more days.
There we go. We're almost there.
It'll be May.
All right. Well, until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.